What's up, y'all? Des the Mess back once again. My pronouns are still she, her, and they, them. This week we are getting right back into our series dissecting and discovering hidden meanings and lore behind ICP's Dark Carnival through the Joker's Cards albums. This week we are on the Ringmaster, of course. Last week we did Beverly Kills 50187. It was really nice re-listening to that because it had been a couple years since I actively listened to it. So I got to learn a few things, and reading over the lyrics and doing that video on it actually gave me an even better understanding, so I could appreciate it more. And same sort of thing with this album here. The Ringmaster, I mean, if we're talking out of the original 6, it's higher on my list of albums that I like. So EPs aside, if we're just talking about the 6 Joker card albums, Carnival of Carnage is at the bottom. Ringmaster is, it's hard to say. Because I'm rating on a scale of 6, right? I would say if Carnival of Carnage is a 6 out of 6, with 6 being last place, then Ringmaster's probably 4 out of 6. And yeah, I think I'm pretty comfortable with that number. So with the imagery, right, the Ringmaster appears as a clown with sinister eyes, goblin-like ears, and a long pointed chin, ending in a devilish beard. His wide grin is crooked and fanged, and he wears a large top hat. He uses 3 fingers on each of his clawed hands to make the symbol of forks up and forks down, attributed to gang signs. It kind of looks like this, and like that. I'm not doing it with both hands. So he is drawn in gold and black. I think the gold is important because gold is kind of considered a royal or regal color, so it makes him seem extremely important. And he is, because he is the leader of the Dark Carnival. He literally brings it in. If you saw my Carnival of Carnage video, I talked a little bit about that, but I didn't extrapolate because I was mostly focusing on that. I know on the first one out of this series, I talked about how the Ringmaster is the leader and he brings the carnival in. There's debate about whether he's actually the first thing that you see in the Dark Carnival, but that's that'll come up a few times. So the first song is also an intro track. They've never done that before. Wax Museum is the intro track and first song combined, the likes of which hasn't happened since. Every other LP of the Joker cards has a defined intro, and then the first song is the second track. Except for this. I have to point out a slur against Romani people used to describe a mechanical fortune teller right at the beginning of the song, as it's one that many people don't realize is a slur. I'll link the lyrics below, as well as a blog post explaining why the word used is problematic. In order not to derail too much from the topic of the episode, I've given that brief summary, and here are the lyrics. Greetings, welcome to the slur of fortunes. Your coin was very much appreciated, and now I shall grant you your future. It seems my cards of tarot have dealt you a very odd hand. A hand of 6 Joker's cards. This is very rare, and suggests something most hideous is approaching you. You should be visited by a dark circus, a circus of horror, pain, and anguish. This traveling mass of evil will leave your lifeless corpse to rot, while entrapping your soul to be displayed at future stops. Oh yes, you must also be aware that it is your own evil doings which have brought about this dreaded carnival's visit. All of the sins and hatred you have cast during your life have whipped and spun into form. The form of one who leads this gruesome parade of pain into your life. One sinister beast, one known only as Ringmaster. The Wax Museum appears to be an exhibit where some of the most evil people are trapped as figures to be displayed as a warning for those entering. The character of the Ringmaster is sort of a mirror of an individual. As Violent J states, the ICP is of the Ringmaster, and the Ringmaster is of the actions of mankind. Yeah, motherfucker, now you gotta face your worst enemy, and that's yourself. The idea of the Dark Carnival is one of karmic retribution. What we put out into the world comes back to literally haunt us in the form of the Ringmaster leading the charge of our wrongdoings, turned into rides and attractions that symbolize our sins and embody the pain we put out, and sealing those of us whom could be the best worst examples of how to act to serve as a warning. In the case of the Wax Museum, it reminds me of Vlad the Impaler, using the bodies and heads of his enemies as display pieces to warn attackers of what happens when they cross him. Based on the narrator's description of the Ringmaster, he is probably the first entity of the carnival that people come into contact with as he travels across space and time to surprise you and yours at your very front door. However, it could be argued, as we'll see later in the series, that the Wraith is the first one we see, since it represents the Grim Reaper. But it doesn't lead the carnival, as the Ringmaster is hinted at doing. Perhaps they travel together. The Ringmaster brings the carnival with him as the Wraith touches you to end your life, but they would both walk you through the grounds, led by the Ringmaster. It isn't totally clear, so I'll use my speculation here. The first ride on this album is the Murder Go Round. This song is quite literally about the cycle of violence that people get caught in, and is also continuing the theme of karma. What you're dishing out, I catch, it comes back to you. There's also the topic of gang violence with the forks up, forks down, and forks sideways lyric, which represents different gangs' hand signs and how they are perpetually caught in turf wars. We love gang bangers and we hope they love us back. They say this because they have a sort of veiled hope that gangs can end the violence and focus on a common enemy, the rich. After all the imagery on the Carnival of Carnage album, it makes sense that their next album starts off on the same page. According to the lyrics, people who die from gang violence end up with a ticket to the Murder Go Round. Something I disagree with here is the punishment aspect based on my current understanding of politics. Some people will engage in gang violence for their entire lives, even after coming to an understanding that the cycle of it is never-ending and will probably be the end of them, either through death or prison. But younger people who end up in gangs may truly not understand the repercussions that come with the lifestyle and will meet an unfortunate and early demise. While there is an element of choice, there is also the underlying systemic issues that draw people into gang life, usually focused around poverty and lack of community. We can avoid harmful stereotypes while addressing that children and teens in unstable families or compromised living situations are more likely to seek friends for help and distractions, and as a result will meet some bad influences that bring them into the lifestyle. So the idea that some of those folks should spend time in the afterlife on the Murder Go Round to teach them some sort of a lesson seems unfair if they never got to fully realize that an alternative was reasonable. However, we can't say this without also recognizing that just because someone chooses not to engage with gangs doesn't mean their life is going to instantly be easier. This is a really nuanced topic, and I want to keep it brief by capping it there, but I hope the point I made was clear. Yes, there is a cycle of violence involved in gang life. Yes, troubled minors can end up seeking community from a gang and resources from their crime tactics in wealth acquisition, but also, yes, the systems at play are built against them even before they enter a gang, and would still be against them if they didn't. So it feels like a choice of desperation and or coercion, and less like a conscious one. Very few people wake up thinking, I want to join a gang and participate in violence. And there are plenty of videos of inmates and ex-gang members who would say that over time they realized they needed to get out of the life and found it almost impossible except through death. Even imprisonment has a gang culture that can be almost unavoidable for people who lived in it on the outside. The next song, Chicken Huntin'. This is a classic ICP song. Most people are familiar with and prefer the Riddle Box version, but this one has an early ICP sound. It's fun and funky. The song from start to finish is about Jay and Shaggy going through a racist southern town and getting rid of all the chickens, the racist rednecks who live there. There's a ton of stereotypes, of course, about white trash behavior, including animal sex, selling moonshine, and alcoholism. It's one of my favorites, specifically the Riddle Box version, but lyrically, one of their best ones, I think. Mr. Johnson's Head, for continuing the theme of racism, or anti-racism. This is one of my personal favorites of ICPs. Jay talks about a fictional situation in which he's back in high school, and his teacher hangs a Confederate flag as part of a history lesson. So after class, he beheads Mr. Johnson and carries the head around in his backpack. Throughout the song, there are skits from the substitute teacher, Mr. Felcher, which is an excellent and hilarious pun, trying to cover up what really happened, as the class is suspicious of Mr. Johnson's disappearance. In the second verse, Violent J has a pretty accurate depiction of Christopher Columbus. I can hear the teacher man talking about Columbus. He's nothing but an old dead fuck with a compass. Ran up on a beach and threw everybody off, and then he claimed discovery, and now we all applaud. Whether he realizes it, Violent J made a pretty succinct description about colonization and white supremacy, since he's clearly talking about the displacement of indigenous folks by white European settlers. Before the third verse, the skit details a classmate asking the substitute when Mr. Johnson will be back, and the substitute is clearly trying to lie anxiously. Jay starts the verse talking about how he murdered Mr. Johnson and nobody suspects him because he's so much of an outcast, unknown loser that he isn't even considered a threat. 'Cause they'd rather learn about a redneck chica, and chica, I'm going to have to assume, based on chicken hunting, is an abbreviated version of chicken, CHICKE apostrophe. 'Cause they'd rather learn about a redneck chica who owned a couple slaves, but I guess it doesn't matter. Fuck Washington, Benjamin, fuck 'em all out. They can suck my nuts till their wooden teeth fall out. This lyric is amazing because of how politically charged it is that Violent J recognizes the obvious racism of the Founding Fathers. It's a classic, and it's really important for me as a leftist to see how ICP has attempted to reach people through crass, simple words that accurately portray bigger concepts. They walked so people like me could dissect their music and run with the hatchet. Next, we'll move on to Southwest Song. ICP uses some samples from an album that Mr. Rogers, yes, that Mr. Rogers made. And I think this song implies that nobody is wholly good or bad, and that situations and environments influence our decisions. The track opens with one sample. Good people sometimes think bad things. Good people dream bad things, don't you? Good people even do bad things. Once in a while we do. This is a split verse song in which Jay and Shaggy take turns rapping within each section, rather than having one rapper per verse, and they trade off talking about different scenarios they're in, prefacing that they can't be totally to blame because of their environments. This echoes a little bit of what I was talking about on Murder Go Round, and how they're actually acknowledging here, which they didn't do on that track, how violence and theft are not always inherently the individual's choice. The following track, Get Off Me Dog, and the next one, Who Asked You, they seem just like character descriptions, I guess, of Violent J and Shaggy as characters and not of Joe and Joey as people. So Get Off Me Dog, honestly, is just a goofy track where Shaggy gets to solo a verse and talk about how absurd he is as a character, somewhat to prove that he's not a bitch, which Violent J says at the beginning. The word on the streets is. He says at the end of his verse, 19 years of breathing smog has got me mental. which is a theme we'll see explored a bit on the Terror Wheel EP. Spoilers for the next 2 weeks. Perhaps this was foreshadowing, or maybe it denotes that some of the tracks from Terror Wheel would have been on Ringmaster and didn't make the cut. We'll get to that on the next episode. Who Asked You? The intro to this song starts with a chant of "Wicked crimes, wicked times." This will also be repeated as a background chant during the outro chorus, the lyrics of which are, "Why do we do the things that we do? Roses ain't red, and violets ain't blue. Why do we do the things that we do? Wicked rhymes, wicked times, you too." A lot of this song is pretty much for shock and gross factor, but it paints a picture similar to the last song about minding one's own business. Get off me, dog. Who asked you? Just makes sense. The Dead One. Violent J doesn't realize that he's been killed from a gunshot wound, so he's questioning his mortality, presumably as a spirit or a zombie. At first, he thinks he got away unscathed, but can't feel for sure if he's still alive. Throughout the song, he talks about walking around his house and feeling his insides slowly rotting, teeth falling out, his friends not seeming to react to him at all. Toward the end, he sees demons laughing at him, so it could be inferred he's going to hell, especially since this part is followed by what sounds like a preacher yelling almost inaudibly in the background. I've looked online and I can't find a text translation. At some point, the supposed preacher yells about dying alone, hating and hating. That's most of what can be heard, because the rest of it is buried in cacophony. My Funhouse. This track opens up with a skit where a woman is talking to cops about her husband's disappearance, and they found his car in front of a strange house on Detroit's southwest side. To comfort her, the chief recommends his junior fondle the woman's breasts. For some reason, this works. That's completely absurd, of course. I think you could say that there's a satirical spin on how cops tend to be hands-on with people when they shouldn't be. I think it's just being gross, I'll be honest. This song has some backwards, reversed lyrics in it. They're somewhat hard to decipher, but you can hear a clown chanting "Richie, Richie, Richie," because this part comes after the first verse, where Jay explains the rich man has broken down in front of his funhouse and enters to use a phone, only to be killed on one of the rides. You can also hear them going, "Fun, house, fucking bitch, I'm sick in my nugget." There's some maniacal laughter and other generic screaming, too. This isn't the first time they've used reversed content, but it's the first time they used it more distinctly. This is a theme that carries on to following Joker cards, where songs will end up with hidden messages that get more and more straightforward and meaningful. After the second breakdown section, the same backwards chorus is repeated, and then "the funhouse" is repeated to the end. Backwards, it would be the opposite way. I used the audio program Audacity to load the track and reverse the parts I needed in order to hear these sections correctly. Moving on to the Maggots. This mimics the Southwest song in that Jay and Shaggy rotate who's rapping every quad. Maggots in this song refer to people who are living with ill intent. I could assume by this definition it means they are sucking the life out of others for their own benefit. At the end, a sample from Michael Bell is repeated, where two people are trading remarks. "How do I get myself into situations like this anyway? Be careful, old boy." I think it's pretty interesting because it really paints a picture of not fully comprehending the type of environment you're in when you're making decisions. Especially in regards to the gang life that I was talking about earlier. In this specific song, they're talking about people who are con artists and liars and that sort of thing, who are literally just acting like maggots feeding on others. So, yeah, I don't know. It's not one of my favorite songs, but I like it. Wagon Wagon. If I'm gonna die, I'm going out riding the wagon. The wagon is a ghost car that takes people straight to hell, with the ringmaster driving it. In this song, Jay specifically calls out Officer Larry Nevers, who beat Malice Green to death in 1992. This is a good example of ICP directly naming a cop who committed police brutality. The wagon goes around collecting the dead, and it can fit an unknowable amount of people bodies inside. And Jay says, and it ain't no tellin' how many clowns inside. Told you 17, but I lied. The number 17 was also referenced on 17 Dead on the Beverly Kills EP, and it's a call out to the fact that Carnival of Carnage only sold 17 copies on its initial release. While we're on this song, I want to point out a word that a lot of people use around Halloween season, meaning creepy or scary, that's in the lyrics. I'll link that in the description as well, but it comes from a slur against black people, so despite its mainstream use, similar to what we saw on the intro track, I'm calling attention to it. I've worked to remove these words from my vocabulary, and I hope you can too. The Loons. Violent J is stalking someone for at least 3 blocks, calling them from a payphone every block to let them know he's that many blocks away. It can be assumed that person is rich because Jay says, laughing in your castle, but I can't cross your moat, but then I take a boat and cut your fucking throat. In the second verse, Jay states, your little governor has taken everything I got. In the third verse, he echoes the sentiment with, everything you've ever done to me is out of hate. I'm begging on my knees and you slam your golden gate. So I picked myself up and I snuck around the back and took your money stack and stabbed your fucking neck. The loons is probably slang for lunatics, because Jay refers to himself as a loon and talks about loons in the trees calling out, which insinuates that his character is hallucinating. At the end of the song, the person he is stalking shoots him dead at the door. Love Song. This song is pretty crude and sexist, but it's clear satire of an R&B song where Jay is overtly misogynistic. I can assume this is done in a sardonic fashion, but it still doesn't feel great to listen to. That being said, this appears to be the first time that ICP used the term neddin to refer to pussy, followed by bugs on my nugs. As if to follow the character story from the last song, this one has us visiting the consequences of unprotected sex. I'm not going to explore the lyrics because while they're cartoonish, they're pretty sexist. I think the moral of the story is clear if you're taking a positive message from these 2 tracks. Be honest with your partners and wear protection. House of Mirrors. A carnival barker attracts a young kid to the House of Mirrors where he can see himself in all weird shapes and sizes, which is a metaphor for being fake, false, and a liar. Look into the big mirror, your reflection is so clear. Devil's head, rotting flesh with the snakes inside your chest. The mirrors in this attraction reveal to you what's inside, what you look like to the outside world. The chorus is pretty blunt about this. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the wickedest of all? 3 blind mice, deepest fear. Welcome to the House of Mirrors. Their usual attacks are on the rich and the racist here. Capital E is on this track as well. So between the 3 of them, it's a pretty similar song to Taste from the Carnival of Carnage album, bringing the violence of the ghetto to the undeserving elitists. When I say undeserving, I mean they deserve the violence and not their power. The carnival barker comes back at the end with these parting words. Who's next for the one and only House of Mirrors? This carnival will only be in your town until our job is done. So get it over with and step into the House of Mirrors. You, young lady, come this way. Step into the House of Mirrors and see the spineless, heartless, stingy, rich little skank that you are. Or maybe you'd be interested in the Murder-Go-Round, or the Wax Museum, or maybe the Bearded Man Jump Steady will supply your thrills. Or how about the juggling trio of Nate the Mac, Rude Boy, and Chucky? All of these fabulous events and surprises are brought to you by... It cuts off there because it fades out, and the final track begins. Something I really like about the House of Mirrors, lyrically, it's some of Jay and Shaggy's best work early on, and it really paints a good picture of, if you can imagine being in an actual House of Mirrors at a carnival, how each of those images distorts you in different ways. And because the mirrors in this case are supposed to be magical or mystical, they will be distorting you into the actual embodiment of your falsehoods. I think that's really cool imagery. As someone who really appreciates, carnivals and clowns and all that sort of stuff, that's really good. That's really good. Ringmaster's Word. This track has a lot of repetitious phrases taken from Famous Monsters Speaks track Dracula's Return. It's from the 70s. Given the way it is presented, it can be assumed that the Ringmaster would speak like this. Whether or not he's supposed to be a vampire isn't made clear, but the intent is clearer when the lyrics are presented, so I'll read them without so much repetition. I have a purpose is said 9 times. This is essentially the chorus or refrain. That would point to the fact that the Ringmaster has a purpose for appearing. Take your little knife, stab me, go, strike my heart, sinister laughter. The idea would be that the Ringmaster can't die because he's a spirit of the dark carnival. So go ahead, stab him, it'll do nothing. I have a purpose is said 4 times. Again, that's treated like a chorus. Such things can't exist, and some laughter are repeated once, followed by I have a purpose. I think what they're going for there with such things can't exist would be the idea that if someone is like, you're a demon, you're an evil spirit, surely such things don't exist. Like that sort of attitude, very haughty and like, oh, there's no way, even though he's clearly misleading that person in saying it that way. And I think the tone as portrayed in the song is pretty clear in the same way that I was explaining it. I have a purpose is said 4 times again. You will tell them of me and how one day I shall come for them is followed by more laughter, repeated once. Again, the idea, I think, right, is the whole point of the Dark Carnival system is that Violent J had a dream where he was visited by spirits of a dark carnival. So, not saying that the Ringmaster figure specifically appeared to him, more or less this is an interpretation of that dream to spread the message he's spreading. And I really seriously doubt he would have said those exact words, but for the sense of mystifying it, the idea that the Ringmaster would have, visited Jay in a dream and been like, you will tell them of me and how one day I shall come for them to bring the dark carnival, so on and so forth. I like that because this is building up the character of the Ringmaster. Which is something that I think lacks on later albums. They do a pretty good job of introducing the characters on later albums and kind of talking about them, but this is the first time where they use so much external sampling and references kind of to build the character and make him larger than life. Because he is the Ringmaster, and again, he's tinted in gold, it's supposed to be that he is so important. And I think they did a really good job at creating, building, and solidifying his character as like the embodiment of your sin and your wrongdoings in this world. I have a purpose 4 more times. Quietly, I will come over your bed. I will lean over and gently bite your neck. Again, I don't think the Ringmaster is a vampire in the traditional sense. I think they used that line because it's from the Dracula track, of course. But I think they used that line more as if to say he's being seductive, right? Like, if the Ringmaster is the embodiment of your sins, it would make sense that as he leads the carnival during your life, the energy of the Ringmaster would be misleading you to the point that you would end up arriving at the carnival, and it would only be through doing the right thing that you would be free of his influence in the first place. So the idea that he would come in while you're sleeping and bite your neck, I like that, because I think the symbolism is not meant to be that he's a vampire so much as he's seducing you into the sin in the first place. Violent J interjects here with several instances of Ringmaster while the character laughs, as "I have a purpose" is said 7 more times before closing with "You will tell them of me and how one day I shall come for them." So the Ringmaster will come for us all, maybe in our sleep, maybe to bite our neck, but in every case to lead us through the carnival or drive us straight to hell in a wagon. What will he look like? Our true human form, or a bastardized amalgamation of all of our sins and wrongdoings, taking the form of an evil clown? Time will tell, I suppose, assuming you believe in that sort of thing. This has been another wonderful episode dissecting the Ringmaster album. Next week, we're going to jump onto the Terror Wheel and take that for a spin. If you like what I'm doing, check out all of my links below. Throw me a couple bucks. Follow me on social medias, and comment, share, subscribe, tell your friends about it. Let me know what you think. I love having discussions about this stuff. I'm really into ICP lore. I wouldn't be doing a series about it if I wasn't. This is super fun. I think it's really important, especially... I did a lot of talking on the Carnival of Carnage and Beverly Kills episodes, like sidebar talking, more or less. There are so many tracks on this album that I really tried to summarize everything that I was saying within the paragraphs I was typing about each track, so I didn't spend so much time sidetracking. And I don't know. Tell me what you think. Like, if that's a weird format. I kind of liked it because it felt like my thoughts were more structured. I had a lot more succinct way of putting things instead of going off on a tangent, per se. But yeah, like I said, out of 6, this is probably 4 on my favorite albums. It's really good. It builds the character. I think, problematic language aside, it does a pretty good job of explaining what they're trying to get across. It's not perfect. Nothing of theirs ever is or will be. I love it all the same. I accept it for what it is. I hope y'all do too. So once again, if you like what I'm doing, let me know, let your friends know, send them to the channel. Send me a couple bucks. I'm doing this for free, but I do find it fun. So it's interesting. It's philosophical. It's pretty heady stuff. It gets me to think. I record videos like this once a week, thinking about more in the future. Next week, again, we'll be returning to the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, so check out my other series playlist if that's something you're into. And if it's not, tune in here in another 2 weeks for another episode of this. Like I said, we'll be diving into the Terror Wheel. And yeah, I think that's about it for me. Glad you all could come by and listen and or watch, and we'll see you next time.